Hey guys, and welcome back to Heebie-Jeebies TV. Now, I know it's been a long time since we last filmed a video, and that's just because life got extremely crazy. There was a lot of stuff going on. Everything was very hectic, very busy schedules. So we had to take a little bit of a break, but we're back, and I'm very happy to be back. I have a lot of inspiration. I have a lot of interesting stories I want to share with you guys. But of course, if you guys have any video suggestions, any stories that not many people have heard of before, whether they're true crime or paranormal, leave them in the comments below. I will definitely take a look and start planning some more content for you guys. Now, before we get into today's video, just want to send you guys a quick reminder to comment, like, subscribe. If you guys are into true crime, paranormal, unsolved mysteries, then this is the channel for you. So let's get into today's story. Now, this is going to be quite a familiar one. A lot of people will have heard about this story, and some of you will be more familiar with it than others. But it's actually one of Europe's most famous unsolved cases. And if you don't already know what I'm talking about, today we're going to talk about the Isdal Woman. This story actually takes place back in 1970. To be specific, it was November 29th when the Isdal Woman was actually found in the region of Isdalen in Bergen, Norway, and it's a super remote area. A lot of people go hiking there, but since her body was found in 1970, there haven't been a whole lot of clues or information since then that have led to police to actually finding out what happened, who she was, and to this day, it still remains an unsolved mystery. So let's go back a little bit and let's start at the beginning. So it was a cold day, November 29th, 1970, in Bergen, Norway. Now, there was a man with his two daughters, and they were actually going out for a hike that day. Now, this area where they were hiking, it is quite remote, and it's also known as the Ice Valley, like I mentioned earlier, but a lot of people also don't know that this place also has a darker name known as the Death Valley. Now, this not only comes from the amount of hikers that go missing in this area just due to getting lost and succumbing to the elements, but also because this place has a reputation because it is so isolated. A lot of people who want to end their lives go out there and, get the job done because it's isolated and they just kind of want to be alone. They don't want anyone to find them. So on this day, the family was out hiking when one of the daughters actually noticed an odd smell. So they're walking around trying to figure out what that smell is, right? And eventually they figure out that it's something burning, but it wasn't a regular type of burning. It didn't smell like campfire or wood. So they're continuing on and they're following the smell, trying to figure out where this is coming from. And when they do, they were completely shocked at what they found. When they came across the smell, they immediately noticed that it was a dead body, and it was a very odd scene. There was a dead body facing upwards. There was a bunch of items scattered around. There was a dead campfire right next to it. And this was enough to make the family completely freak out. So instead of staying around, looking into it more, the family decided to turn back, go back to the town, and inform the police right away. When the police get to the crime scene, they immediately notice a few odd things. Like I said earlier, her body was found laying down facing upwards, and her hands had a weird positioning. They were kind of like folded like this near her torso area. And the entire upper part of her body was burnt. It was still kind of smoking, actually. That was the odd smell that the girls had smelled when they were looking for the body. It was only, though, covering her entire upper portion of her body, including her face, to the point where you could not identify her anymore. And surrounding her body were dozens of items. A lot of these were found to belong to her. Some of these we don't know much more information on, but here's a quick rundown on what police found surrounding her body. They found an empty bottle of St. Helvard liqueur, 2 plastic water bottles, a plastic passport container, rubber boots, a wool jumper, a scarf, nylon stockings, an umbrella, a purse, a matchbox, a watch, 2 earrings, and a ring. They also found traces of burnt paper and a fur hat that had traces of petrol on it. Now, Tormund Bones, who was one of the forensic investigators on the case, actually noted that when he saw how the items were scattered around, he noticed that they were placed in an odd position, almost as if someone had done a ritual with the items or some sort of ritual with her death, just because they were placed around her in a very peculiar way. Now, the only thing all of these items had in common at the time were that they all had the labels or anything that could potentially be used as an identifier removed or completely rubbed off of them. Now, when I thought about this, it reminded me of that other case of Jennifer Fairgate, where all of the items that were found in her hotel room and in her suitcase were completely removed of labels and identifiers as well. Only 3 days later, the police actually were able to identify 2 suitcases that were found at the Bergen train station thanks to fingerprint analysis, and these belonged to the Isdal Woman. Now, when they started looking through them, they found a bunch of other random things, some mysterious things, some suspicious things that also actually ended up having the labels and identifiers removed. Here's a quick rundown of what they found in her suitcases. So they found money sewn into the lining of her suitcases in different currencies as well. They found clothing, shoes, wigs, makeup, creams, glasses, notepads with coded writing on them. And then, like I said earlier, they all had their labels and identifiers removed. So moving on to her autopsy, it was discovered that she died from a combination of 2 things. The first was incapacitation by phenobarbital, which is a type of anxiety medication. And then the second thing was carbon monoxide poisoning. In addition to this, there was also soot found inside of her lungs, which meant that she had to have been alive when she was set on fire, because she was able to inhale the smoke into her lungs, which resulted in the buildup of soot. But it wasn't over there. It really looked like she had gone through some sort of ordeal before she died, because when they were examining the rest of her body, they actually found some intense bruising around her neck. They suggested that it could have resulted from a fall, but I'm not really sure how you get bruises on your neck from falling. It kind of just sounds awkward. I'm not sure how you would do that. But they also suggested that it could have resulted from a blow to her neck, like she could have gotten beaten or someone would have hit her. So in addition to that, the most surprising thing I think from this autopsy was that police actually found 50 to 70 sleeping pills inside of her stomach. And these pills were actually found to be the same brand, the same type of pill that were found next to her body as well. So immediately after her autopsy, police start going to the public to ask for help. They start asking for people to please come forward if they have any other information, if they remember seeing this woman. And of course, the tips started coming in, and most of them started coming in from the last hotel that she had stayed at. So the Isdal Woman was last seen on November 23rd, 1970, as she had checked out of the hotel Heiderman, Horda Heidemann in Bergen, Norway. Now, staff recalled seeing her, and what they all mentioned was that she was fairly attractive. She was somewhat of a short woman. She was 5'4". She had small brown eyes, and they mentioned that she usually kind of stayed to herself. She was somewhat of an introvert. But they also noticed that her behavior was a little bit off, because she always seemed to be on guard, like she was almost paranoid or just always looking over her shoulder. One waitress actually remembered seeing her at the hotel restaurant, where she was seen dining with 2 German Navy officials as well as an officer. Then when she checked out of her hotel on November 23rd, One of the staff members noted that she had paid her bill in cash and then asked for a taxi. And then that was the last time anyone had seen her. Now, during the investigation, police started looking into the notepads they found. And a lot of these notepads had coded information on it. They weren't able to tell right away what was on it. So as they started, deciphering these messages, they ended up finding out that these messages were actually dates and locations of the previous hotels where she had stayed at. And from this, they were able to gather that she was actually moving across Europe, mostly through Norway. She went to Oslo and a couple other cities, and she had also made a stop in Paris. On top of this, though, I think one of the most shocking pieces of information was that they actually discovered that she had 8 fake passports and different aliases that she was using. Now, this gave birth to tons of additional theories of what could have happened or even who she was. And some of the fake names that she was using were based on Catholic names. So police often think that she could have potentially also been Catholic or would have been fond of that religion. And some of the names she was using were Geneviève Lancier, Claudia Tieltz, Claudia Niels, Vera Jarl, and Alexia Zarn Mercier. So with this new information, police start backtracking and they start interviewing people at the other hotels that this woman had stayed at. And some of the things people were mentioning was that she smelled like garlic, very odd, but that's what they said. And that they also noticed that whenever she would check in a few days later, she would always ask for a room change. And then on top of this, they also noticed that her hair would change often. So they all figured that she was wearing wigs, which makes sense considering that the police did find multiple wigs inside of her suitcases. Now, with all this information, police were able to put together some sketches. They were able to put these out towards the public in hopes that someone would come forward and claim this woman, someone that knew her, a friend, a family member, but this absolutely went nowhere. So on February 5th, 1971, a few months after her body was discovered, she was given a burial where she was actually buried in a zinc coffin. The only thing that they didn't include in her coffin was her jaw because they wanted to do some testing on it. But the rest of her body was buried in this zinc coffin in an unmarked grave in Norway. And they actually had the foresight to take photos of the ceremony in case any future family members were ever to come forward to claim her. And after that, her case was closed. It was deemed to be a self-inflicted death. The police didn't find any additional information to prove otherwise. And then that was that. However, the case had a few updates throughout the years. And it did take a while for the first one to come in. It wasn't until 1991 when a taxi driver who wanted to remain anonymous actually came forward and said that he was the taxi driver that picked her up from the final hotel that she had stayed at. Now, he said he picked her up at the hotel, she got into the car alone, and then they drove, picked up another man who remains unidentified, and then he drove them to the Bergen train station where he dropped both of them off. Now, this makes sense because the police did find her 2 suitcases there. But other than that, that was the last time anyone ever came forward to report seeing her before her death. The next update came in 2005, which actually dated back to 1970. Now, this one is a little bit creepy, kind of gave me the chills. Now, this hiker was actually out hiking in the same hills where her body was found when he actually came across this woman. They were actually walking in opposite directions towards each other when he noticed that this woman was coming towards him. And the first thing he noticed is that she was quite underdressed for the weather. It gets cold out there and she didn't have a jacket on. The next thing he noticed was that there were 2 men behind her with coats on. And all he could really say about these men were that they seemed to be Southern. And I'm not exactly sure what he means by Southern because that can be so many different things. It's quite vague. I don't know if he means Southern European, South American, like South from the US. That's up for interpretation. But he did say, though, that as he was getting closer to the woman, they made eye contact. And he noticed that she had kind of like a somber look to her, a somber feeling, like she had kind of resigned herself to doom or to her fate. And he was convinced that when they made eye contact, that she was going to say something to him, but actually just stopped. So they continued walking. They crossed each other. They walked in the opposite directions to wherever each party was going. But he said that this experience kind of stayed with him and it disturbed him so much that he felt like he needed to do something. So he hiked back down into town, went to the police station and reported this, only to just be laughed at by the police. They kind of just told him, forget about it. Don't worry about it. It's probably nothing. So much so that the police didn't record him coming into the police station at all. There's no record of this complaint. There's no record of him ever coming in. Now, the next update came in 2019, and this one actually came in from a man who claimed to have dated this woman in 1970. Now, the first thing he said is that she pretended to be much younger than she actually was. He said that she had told him that she was 26, when in reality she was actually closer to 40, if not in her early 40s. Now, the other thing that was odd about this is that as they were dating, you start to get close to someone, you start to share more personal things. But this guy said that she barely gave him any personal information, and it was very odd to him. So he started doing his own digging, and, he started actually going through her personal belongings, where he ended up finding things like wigs, and a lot of the clothing that he came across had the labels removed as well. So he was somewhat paranoid, during the time there was a Cold War going on. So he thought that she might have been a spy. Now, his instincts said to go to the police, report this, but he actually was afraid of doing this. So wanting to go to the police and report this, he actually went against his better judgment and decided not to report it just because he was afraid of what could happen to him. He was afraid of retaliation. He didn't know what would happen to him in case she actually was a spy. Would someone come get him? So he just kept his mouth shut and they went their separate ways. So when I was doing research on this story, I came across a lot of theories, and some of them were definitely, I guess, far reaches. I don't think a lot of them were very likely. But there was one theory that was a forefront runner that was very popular amongst people, and it seemed to be the consensus amongst everyone's opinion, and that is the one that she was a spy. Now, there's a lot of reasonings, or I guess a lot of evidence that shows she could have been a spy. And like I said earlier in the video, it also reminded me of Jennifer Fairgate, who was also found dead in her hotel room, and she was shot. And a lot of the similarities between both of these people make me feel like she could have also been a spy. There was a lot of speculation for Jennifer Fairgate that she was also a spy. She had wigs, she had fake passports, she had all the labels on her clothing removed as well. And when I read that the police ruled this a suicide or a self-inflicted death, it made me really question whether or not this was the truth. It just did not look like this could have happened that way. And when I was doing my research, I found a lot of people agreeing with that thought. In 2017, with new technology, the police were actually able to do some tests on her jawbone. They actually did a test called stable isotope analysis, and they were able to identify that she was born in the 1930s, plus or minus 4 years. And on top of this, they were actually able to determine that she was either born in southern Germany or somewhere along the French-German border, which makes sense because whenever she was at hotels checking in, she was always known to speak both French and German. Now let's go back to the spy theory. So based on how much she was traveling and the items that were found in her suitcases, the wigs, the fake passports, the different identities, uh, rubbing off the labels, removing the labels, it's easy to see why someone would think that she is a spy, including the fact that her body was found in an extremely isolated area. So at the time that the Isdal woman was found, NATO was actually testing a new weapon called the Penguin missiles. And there was actually a report that came in that actually didn't actually go anywhere, but it came in of a man that said he saw the Isdal woman watching these missiles take off as they were being tested and that she was taking notes on them. And during this time in 1970, in case you didn't know, and I'll put a map here so you guys can see, Norway was also just located outside of the Soviet Union, and this particular area had a reputation for being a hub for Russian and Israeli spies during the Cold War. Now, all of this put together led a lot of people to think that the Isdal woman could have potentially been either a Russian or an Israeli spy. However, there was a former KGB agent, and his name was Alexander Vasilyev, and he actually came forward after hearing about this case and this theory, but he actually thinks that she was not a spy. He actually thinks that she was more likely to have been a courier or a messenger. Now, his reasonings for this make a lot of sense when you listen to them. And having an insider perspective, it kind of gives him more credibility with his opinion. He says that if she had actually been a Russian spy, she probably would only have one or two identities that she fully commits to and knows in and out. Because your job as a spy is to completely blend in and to not bring any attention to you. Versus her being a courier or a messenger, she probably just had a bunch of random identities and passports just to get herself around. It didn't really matter whether she blended in or not. She just needed people not to actually know who she was. Her having multiple identities probably just meant that she was there to do a job or deliver information from her handler or from a different organization. She wasn't really there to carry out a full mission where she needed to blend into the crowd at that given point. Now, like I was saying earlier, the spy theory is definitely the leading theory. There's a ton of other crazier theories out there, but none of them really add up completely or make more sense. But there's also the fact that we don't have a lot of information to go on. There was just random tips that came in throughout the years. It's been almost 50 years now, if not more, I think. But there's just not a lot of information to go on. Her family never came forward. It seems like she didn't have friends. I find it very surprising that no one would come and claim this woman as someone that they knew. But what I do agree with from what I read about the theories is that this is definitely not someone that took their own life out in the isolation of the woods. And a part of me wonders, like, if she was going to, end her life, I'm surprised that the sleeping pills didn't do the trick. And I'm also wondering, like, if she took that many sleeping pills and was incapacitated, how did she set herself on fire, And especially, why would she only do it to, like, the top part of her body? Not to mention that, burning alive is known to be one of the most painful ways to die. If you want to end your life, why would you not do it in a less painful way? It just, that alone doesn't make sense to me. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you think she was a spy? Have you heard of any other popular theories? Have you heard of any other more convincing theories? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. So that's where we end today's story. Now, if you guys have any other case suggestions, any other stories you guys want me to talk about, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget, we cover true crime here. We talk about the paranormal and solved mysteries. So stories from any of those topics are always welcomed. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.